Welcome to Money Making Sense, the show that talks about all things money. Today we are talking about, well, there's a lot of things, but we're going to kind of start with how abuse in the home might affect your job potential and money, and talk about a specific incident, which I'm guessing one of my guests thought might bring them some extra money. Joining me today is Justin Young. He's the filmmaker and producer of My Hero, the Hitman. Also joining me are two of the subjects of the film, Maile Stant and Shane Stant. So welcome to the show.
Ew.
All right. Shane, I think I'm going to start with you. In case people don't remember or haven't heard of the incident, you are probably most well known for being the person that hit Nancy Kerrigan's knee right before the ice skating nationals in 1994. So the film that Justin has done sort of talks a little bit about that, what led to this incident, but also Maile, you're the sister of Shane, and you didn't know a lot about this growing up. So, Shane, tell me a little bit about what led to this incident to begin with.
Well, I mean, I think depending on how far you want to go back, and the documentary really gets into kind of the culture of our family and how it was raised. I don't make excuses for my decisions, especially negative ones, because I think it's very hard to change if you're making excuses for why you do what you do. But I basically came from a very abusive background, and I lived on my own pretty much from teenage years on. And I was kind of in a position where I just kind of had to do and make my own way, kind of through life. And I think that I was also pretty motivated by money as well, in the sense that, not that this was some great, financial windfall or promise, but I could see the difference between like the things that my father had. Miley and my father dealt in different drugs, marijuana, cocaine, stuff like that. And then my mom was very poor. She had to kind of run away because my father was very abusive to my mom. So I got to kind of see the contrast between, kind of going away and trying to survive, and someone that was kind of doing the wrong things and financially doing, a lot better. I didn't have a desire to be like my father, but I think just in general, a lot of times you end up becoming very similar to people that you really don't want to be like,
Right.
So when it came to the position I was in, when I was approached about the Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, basically attack, is I was in my early 20s. I moved around a lot, did a lot of different kinds of jobs. I'm not somebody that says that, it was a kind of like a one-time incident where I was kind of a good person, and I just kind of got caught up in this one bad situation. My kind of honor, if you want to call it, or my ethos was compromised already. So I was very much more open to doing whatever it took, in a sense, to survive, and then wanting to thrive, beyond that. So I think my morality was definitely in question, at that point.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of being open. I mean, even if somebody suggests something to you, it's in a format like that, you're already questionable about your ethics, because the fact that somebody thinks that you might do something like that means that you've already gotten to the place where you're somebody that actually might, hurt somebody for money.
Right. I do want to go into more a little later in our discussion about how vulnerable you became to be in that situation. But when you were approached to sort of take out Nancy Kerrigan, how did they entice you to do that? I mean, even if your morals were maybe slightly in question, my first question would be, well, what's in it for me? I mean, was there a promise of money, or what is it that you went, oh, okay, that sounds great, I'll go ahead and do this?
Well, a big factor was that the person that approached me was an uncle through marriage, that I was really close to. And I'm not saying that he manipulated me at a young age or anything like that. But I did kind of trust his judgment. I didn't know the other people involved were Sean Eckhart, Jeff Galooly, and Tanya Hardy. I didn't know them, knew nothing about them. I didn't know anything about figure skating. I mean, I knew what figure skating was, but I did not know the dynamics of endorsements. I didn't know how big it was. I believe it's the biggest watch sporting events in the Winter Olympics. So I had no idea, kind of the culture behind figure skating. So when I was approached by him, it was on the context of, well, we'll pay you to make sure that this person doesn't skate in the nationals. And then what's going to happen is we're going to try to parlay that into, she's naturally going to get more money from, at least from what I understood, it was explained to me, is that the two top women athletes get money to train, to travel, all that kind of stuff. Then obviously you have endorsements, whether that's Disneyland, whether that's Coca-Cola, whatever it is. So I think their mindset was that, well, if we can eliminate our biggest competition, then we're going to get more money for our training. We're going to get more endorsements, and it's pretty much going to guarantee that Tanya would go into the Olympics. Because, like I said, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I understand, the first two people at the nationals are going. Whether you were like the best person in the world and you got fourth, you're not going to go. So I think they were hedging their bets on that. And then the real draw, I guess, for myself and my uncle was, and then what's going to happen is that this incident is going to cause people to have like security, bodyguards, stuff like that. And then that would parlay into more work. So they basically, part of it was trying to create an environment of need where there wasn't one previously.
Okay. So I'm sorry, just instead of a huge payout, it was the promise of more work down the road because you've created fear in that environment.
Yes.
Okay. Justin,
and they did offer you, I think it was like $6,000 or something like that, specifically for the attack. And then also the idea of creating this industry that he would then be able to partake in as a security.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Maile, I do want to go to you. You're Shane's sister, but you're much younger than he is. And so you were, what, 3 or 4 at the time of this? And so you weren't even aware of what was happening.
Yeah, I didn't even know my brother. So I had never met him.
So
when this happened, I
right.
didn't meet him. Yeah.
And then after this incident, Shane spent time in jail or prison and then came back home. How old were you when you finally met him when he came home?
I think I was 5 or 6. I think I must have been 5, about 5 years old. 5 or 6.
What was your experience with Shane? I mean, did you see any of the, anger or brutality or anything like that he had sort of been growing up in himself?
Well, prior to meeting Shane, I had already met Shane in my brain. Like I had talked him up so highly in my own mind. And I don't know if I was trying to manifest this male that was going to come into our home and save us from our dad. Like, but I had already been like, oh, that's my favorite brother. And my other two siblings who had known Shane, because they're older as well, they would like taunt me, like, you don't even know him, you've not even met him yet. But in my, like, if I had to do school reports, like the only family members I would draw was like Shane and my dog. So I was like creating this alternate reality with this kind of superhero figure that I thought my brother was going to be, because I had zero context of the event, or I had no knowledge that my brother was a hitman or that he had done time in prison. And I'll never forget the day that I met him. He came up in a Gold's Cadillac and parked, and we had this really long driveway with this fence. And he came out of the car and he was just so big. Like, my brother was massive. I mean, he's big now, but like when you're 5, he was, over 6 feet tall, and just, he was the most muscular human I had ever seen. And he came out with like like some sort of muscle tank. And it was weird because in a second, I think like my brain went into that survival mode where I was like, oh my gosh, if he's not this image, this character that I've created to come and love and hope him to be, if he's just as mean as my dad, like, I'm really screwed because he's huge. So but he literally just said, hi honey, and picked me up in his arms. And it was like he had lived up to everything that I had created him to be in my mind. So that was the hard thing to grapple with, is that who my brother has been my entire life is so contradictory of someone that could hurt someone and be a hitman and just be selfish,
Right,
enough to put his needs in front of other people. It's just so different than the experience that I've had of my brother my entire life. And so I just wanted to share that other viewpoint and that other truth of who my brother really is.
Well, I think we hear this a lot when, anything in the news about somebody, being aggressive towards someone else, maybe killing them, beating them up, things like that. And so many times the family members are just like, that's not the person I knew. So it's interesting to get that different viewpoint on a story that was just known around the world. I mean, everybody mostly has heard this story if you were, especially if you're old enough to have experienced that Olympics in 1994. Justin, how did you meet up with these two and decide to do a documentary about the relationship between Maile and Shane?
I mean, like so many of us, I grew up hearing about the story. I'd watched the 30 for 30 and always kind of had a pretty serious interest just because it was just such a spectacular, strange event. And then I met Maile shortly after I was in documentary film school. So the timing was kind of perfect. I was in Hawaii and we have mutual friends, and we met, and she was, just kind of sharing about her life, and then talked about her older brother, who she said was like her hero. And every good quality that she sees in herself, she attributes to something that was instilled to her by her brother. And then sort of as an aside at the end of this conversation, she's like, oh, and by the way, he's the guy that attacked Nancy Kerrigan.
Oh,
And I was like, I must have misheard you, but did you just say he's the guy that attacked Nancy Kerrigan? And I had known a lot about this event and had never heard that like the hitman was half Hawaiian and had any connection to Hawaii. So I was almost just like, are you sure? Like, that doesn't seem right. And so it was shocking to me, but also immediately I just felt like it was another dimension to somebody that I had kind of peripherally known about and only knew this one thing. And to see somebody look at this person in such a different way, to me, is just fascinating and compelling. And one of my favorite quotes from Bryan Stevenson is, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And I think that this story just kind of illustrates that in a really beautiful way.
I do want to go in, Shane and Maile. You both had the same father. You had different mothers, but the same father. And sounds like, according to the documentary, that the abuse was pretty bad. a lot of emotional abuse. Didn't talk as much about physical abuse. It seemed like more it was very emotional, psychological abuse going on, which can be very traumatic as well. How is it, Shane, you grew up and was on the path of being like, you know, in the underworld essentially, and willing to take out people or at least injure them. But Maile, you have gone to school. You are now just about to get your license as a hula instructor. How do those paths happen? They're very different.
Well, I think obviously all of us have just different base personalities and stuff like that. And then the dynamics of just finance and just the way that the world works changes a lot, you know. So I just turned 51, you know, so I'm so much older than her that, you know, generally speaking, there's kind of this, well, you get a job, you get married, you know, you get a house, you build kids. That was kind of more of my generation, like coming through. When it came to opportunities, I think that there's obviously a huge difference. And between, I'm not saying that the way someone's raised necessarily helps them be financially successful, because there's most of the people that have done it on their own have come from some kind of hardship background, no basis of, you know, help, you know, whatsoever. But I do think that a lot of times, even if they don't come from money, sometimes what happens is that they come from a worldview and philosophy that helps them be successful. So if you have a parent or parents that are like, you know, you really can do, you know, more than you think that you can do, all the way down to, you know, hey, we're going to co-sign for you to get a car to help start building your credit. All of those things come into play, because whether you're in the base survival mode or you're in the mentality of going, wow, I really have the ability, you know, to really accomplish great things. If someone's putting you down every single day, someone does nothing to help you whatsoever, then, and you're being abused physically, emotionally, mentally, there's a lot of psychological things that you have to, and emotional things you have to overcome just to get to ground zero. So you're not starting at a place of relative healthiness. You're starting at a deficit already. So by the time that you're, excuse me, by the time that your impressionable ages have gone through, you already have kind of a worldview of like who you are, what your value is, stuff like that. So, and when you parlay that and mix that with, for example, myself, like becoming a criminal, and then you get convicted, go to prison, you're on, you know, you're a felon, you're an ex-felon forever. And then as that transitions into the way we are now, we have so much information that there's kind of no escaping your past, you know, so you have to either do something and work with that, you know, and utilize it, especially from like a financial standpoint. But first you have to get yourself healed and healthy emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. But there's definitely, for me, in my situation, there was a lot of things that I just couldn't do because I had a felony on my record.
Did you go through counseling in prison, or maybe after you came out of prison? Because usually there's this cycle of abuse. It's handed down from one generation to the next because that's all you understood growing up. So how did you break that cycle, or have you?
Yeah, for me, there wasn't, at least the prisons I was in, they're not designed to rehabilitate you. They're designed to hold you and then release you when it's time for you to be released. So you can do some schooling and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's not really designed to make you grow and be better. That being said, you have to have the mindset that you want to grow and be better. You have to recognize in yourself that there's brokenness that has to be repaired. And when you do that and you start to look into yourself, you start to look into your life, you realize that I didn't have the capability to fix myself. I had the desire, but I did go through, therapy on my own decision to do that. And I just really got into how I could grow as a person, like how I could change. And I think that's one of the most amazing parts of being human that's different than animals and everything else, is we can literally look at ourselves and go, okay, like what kind of person do I want to be? Like, who do I want to be? And I think the big thing is that when I was in prison, I looked at myself and I knew that I would be identified with this attack pretty much forever. Like it wasn't going to go anywhere. And I was like, do I want to be identified with this and turn that into something positive? Or do I want to be identified with this and that's just who I am? And then looking around, we have natural abilities. One of mine is I'm very good at pattern recognition. So I look around and I can see everybody and I see patterns in people's lives. And I was like, this isn't a pattern I want to live. I don't want to be in it. And I could see, people going out, people coming back in, people going out, people coming back in. And then once you get on that cycle and pattern, then it's like, okay, well, who are the people that you're associated with? They're criminals, they're people that are broken, they already have a skewed sense of like value of life, quality of life. And then what happens is then that guy dates a girl that was broken, abused, molested, and then they argue, fight, it becomes abusive. They have kids, those kids watch that abuse going on. Then, that guy gets drugged out of the house by the police. The little kids see that the police are bad because they're pulling their mom or dad out of the house, taking them away, putting them in foster care. They go into foster care where they're molested or treated horribly. They're separated from the people that they do love. And when you're young, you don't care. You don't care if my dad beat me with 2x4s, but I would always be upset if someone hurt him or took him, or whatever. So when you see that trend, then obviously it's going to keep perpetuating itself. So then those kids are going to have a natural affinity to be against authority. They're not going to they don't have the same fear patterns of getting in trouble or something like that. And then if your culture is part of that, whether it's from a gang culture or something, then you're kind of pride yourself on that. So then you're just going to stay in that loop 100%. I think the difference between myself and with my sister is we recognize that, we don't want to perpetuate this life for our future generations, anything like that. And at some point it has to stop because it's just going to keep going and going and going. And you have the ability, if you have the desire, to stop it.
Yeah. Maile, how old were you when the abuse stopped?
When he died. Yeah. So I think that, a huge difference between me and all my siblings, because they are older, was the span of abuse. My dad died when I was 6. So I essentially had 6 years worth of my father. So I was really, really fortunate. It sounds horrible that my father had passed. And then at that time, when my father was sick, that's when my brother came in. So it was this transition of losing someone that was causing abuse and gaining someone that became my protector. So I think that is something, like you speak about my other siblings, they didn't have that. They had a longer span of abuse. And at that point, I think their formidable years had already passed, where my brother didn't provide that sense, or maybe they didn't acknowledge that transition that had happened in the home. And yeah, I think that abuse will manifest itself in different ways with different people. I think mine started a trajectory of perfectionism. You mentioned that I went to school, and anything that I did, I I had to be the best. It was this like perfectionism, and Brene Brown speaks about perfectionism being insecurity. You know, you want this when your foundation of, when you are abused, you know, my father was sexually abusive, to us. And when you have that foundation of your parents are supposed to love and protect you. So if that is broken, you are going to search for love and acceptance in other capacities all around your life. So for me, I had to be, when I acknowledged that my dad was really proud of me when I danced hula, well, then I have to be the best hula dancer. I have to be perfect, because my dad's giving me that affection that I'm yearning, even as a 5-year-old. That those applause, those cheers, you know, that you're looking in the audience for your parents, like that's who you look to those, that's what you defines your view on love. And so I think for me, it had manifested, like I was always a straight A student. I would kill myself. I took 6 AP classes. I essentially entered my first year of college, the first one in our family to go to college. I entered college almost as a junior. But it was like I would kill myself to try and be perfect and to try and be the best at this and the first in our family to do this. And it had gotten really exhausting at a point, you know, like I became this like crazy workaholic, and I was working all the time, and I was like, wow, this is like not me. I'm not doing something that I love. And you know, what my brother instilled in me when I was really young is that like I could fail. That was one of the like most powerful things that my brother gifted me, is because I've always like taken crazy risks and crazy chances in my life, because he's like, yeah, okay, what, oh, well, if you fail, you fail, you know? So that was like something that my brother instilled in me from a really young age, that, you know, that I had the will and the drive to do it and take the chance. And if I'd failed, he'll be there, you know, he'll be there and comfort me and try and pick me up and dust me off. And, you know, something else will come along that you can try next. And yeah, I think that's why me and my siblings were a little bit different, was just the span that I had experienced. The abuse was much less. And then my brother coming in to, you know, really, really transition my life.
Right. Well, in the break, you talked about you had decided several years ago you didn't want a career. When did that change for you? I mean, I'm assuming that you went to college to have some sort of career or degree in something that would take you into a career. What was it that changed that you went, "Oh, don't want the career"?
Well, I didn't go into college with the intention of having a career. The intention was just I needed to be the first one in my family to go to college.
Okay.
So the intention wasn't there. And that's why, you know, schooling for me I actually was kind of bored in college. I like to be challenged by the human experience. I love interacting with people, and I couldn't find a job or a career that I could see myself in the rest of my life, because all I've ever seen myself doing is hula. It's where I feel the most me. It's where I feel that I have the most to contribute to my community, to the world, to the future generations. So I think I fought it for a while because I thought I couldn't make a life out of it. I thought that, you know, the kumu hula that I was looking at, they all had 40-hour-a-week jobs, and then they were doing hula on the side. And that looked like slave labor to me. But no, I've figured out a way to do something that I love and that I feel the need to do, and to be in the space that I need to be in. And it allows me the time and the energy and the space and the presence to raise my daughter in the way that I want to raise her.
And are you making enough money teaching hula that you can afford I'm not saying like, you know, living in luxury necessarily, but you can keep a roof over your head, you're feeding yourself and your daughter, that's all coming to you because you're doing something you love?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had a similar experience. I was raised with a man who was like, you will go into computer science and that's the only thing you should be doing. And I hated computer science. Like, so I got my minor was in theater, and I wound up later in life transitioning from more technical jobs, which I was pretty much miserable in, into entertainment, into radio. So I get that. And the money, I'm making more money now than I was doing a technical job. So yeah, it works.
No more starving artists.
Welcome back to Money Making Sense, the show that talks about all things money. Today, we are talking about how abuse in the home could affect the potential of your income, or at least finding a job that is that you feel good about.
Believe that you belong somewhere, that no one will question you. I was timing the movements of the cameraman. He followed her, he put the camera down, and I just walked right past him to the right. Yeah, and it collapsed.
Joining me today is Justin Young. He's the filmmaker of My Hero, the Hitman. It's a documentary about the relationship between a brother and sister, and the brother, Shane Stant, is the person who hit Nancy Kerrigan just before the Nationals in 1994 for ice skating. His sister is Maile Stant, and Maile, we've just been talking about, you had such a different impression of Shane growing up because you're so much younger and you didn't even realize that this event that had happened until you were an adult. But you have two other siblings, and I'm very curious how the abuse in your family, what is it that they are doing now? Are they on a criminal path, or semi-criminal path? Are they do they have careers, jobs? What is it that they're doing?
Our brother is like I think, well, my brother it's hard because I think in a lot of abusive households, when you have one abusive parent, the other parent takes the complete other end of the spectrum. And oftentimes it comes in the form of enabling. So my other brother has really not accomplished anything in his life. And I think when you don't allow someone the foundational tools necessary to succeed in anything, you're likely to repeat these patterns. So, alcoholism is still very prevalent in his life. And it's like this kind of F the world attitude, and I'm going to do me, and DUIs every couple months. But my mom's right there to bail him out, and spend all of her everything on, making sure that he needs her still. And I think that there's a lot of unhappiness just because of when you don't accomplish things, when you're not challenged in your life and you don't have those moments to be proud of yourself. I think that typically leads to a lot of unhappiness and bitterness. I think that they've used the abuse and stayed. I think that's a safe space and a comfortable zone to remain a victim, and use that as an excuse where, I've always said I had no reason to succeed, and that was reason enough for me. Where a lot of people, if they don't have if everyone is always saying, well, they're going to become that, they're going to become that, like they say, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to become this. And then my sister, she's, successful. She's like a total workaholic. She's a really, really hard worker, an amazing worker. She's super smart, super intelligent, but she has a lot of anger. And I think that, I was really fortunate because even in school, when my dad died, I was allotted the school counselor because of his death, not because of the abuse. So I started going to my school counselor because that became available to me. But I was using it to deal with the abuse that my father, not because he had died. But I think that in our family too, to, you know, I think they just view emotion as weakness. So they can, you know, my sister's very hard, my sister's very rough and pretty gnarly, like she's pretty aggressive, and you know, the attitude is like wild, and there's just a lot of anger, and that's manifested from a lot of hurt. And I don't know if there's just, she isn't comfortable going and talking about the abuse, or she's just kind of like pushed it away and has let it kind of.
Does she have a family now? I mean, do you think this is something that she might be passing on to her children if she has any?
My nephew, she does have one son. He's 14. And she is a very good provider. You know, she's a single parent. She's roofed him and feeds him and does all of that. But in terms of like being a nurturing, loving mother, I think there's room for improvement. And my nephew's always been very sensitive. He's actually super similar to me. So, and when he was born, I was in high school, and I had him all the time. Like I would get the dirty, like I mean, I had him all the time. My sister was just working. So I had him for the first few years of his life before I went on to college. And I hope that that's, you know, left an impact on him to know that he's loved and he's experienced patience, and, you know, he's nurtured. But yeah, I think that there's room for improvement in terms of just being a little bit more soft and gentle, but no, that like physical abuse has not continued with my sister at all.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So Justin, you talk a lot about all of these subjects, the growing up in an abusive household, how that affected Shane, and the decision that brought him to attacking Nancy Kerrigan. Where is your film being shown right now?
So the film will be available on all the video on demand platforms from your cable company. It'll be on Amazon Prime. It'll be on Apple TV and iTunes, YouTube TV, and a bunch of other streaming places May 3rd. So soon, or now.
Yeah.
And you know, just circling back, I think what was interesting to me is to see the parallel of their stories, even though they happened at different points of their life. They each decided at a young age that they needed to protect themselves from the abuse. And Shane decided to build himself up to be the strongest, scariest person who couldn't be a victim anymore. And Maile decided that, you know, if she overachieved, and it would immunize her from ever becoming like her family. And then somehow, miraculously, they each on their own figured out that they were not living authentically. And each of them made a choice to turn back and to live a life that was more truly them. And, you know, I don't know why some siblings have a harder time. I know a lot of people have gone through, you know, similar difficult situations and haven't been able to make that same empowering choice. And, you know, I think we hope that this film will show that it is an option, that you can reclaim who you are. And take it back from whatever you experienced that was of no fault of your own, given your childhood circumstances. And I didn't know going into this if Shane was just a hero to Maile because she had created this delusion or not. But having gone through this film and gotten to know them really well, they are both worthy of being called heroes to me for what they've been able to do.
Wow. Yeah, my opinion has definitely changed, Shane. I was very much aware of the, you know, I was about the age of Nancy Kerrigan when all this happened, and followed Olympics and ice skating very closely. So was very much aware of this incident and was very much surprised by this documentary, and which I'm happy about. I actually am, because I feel like our society is predicated on, if you make a mistake, you can redeem yourself. And yet, how many people actually allow them to others to be redeemed, or even if you have redeemed yourself in some way, people's opinions don't change. They only see the bad thing that happened. So it's actually really nice to see this story that you have taken responsibility. I think that's the biggest thing, Shane, is you actually have taken responsibility for this act, because also so many people don't, and they just keep blaming other people, saying, oh, I've changed, but it's still the other person's fault.
Yeah, I think I really think it's necessary to come and really look at yourself, because if you don't recognize that you are the core of the problem, then it's very difficult to fix the problem. Whether it's a car, whatever the system that's broken is, like, you have to identify what's wrong with it before you can fix it, and I think you have to look at yourself in a humble way, if you can. And then I also think it's very hard for people to take criticism, all of us. And I think it's shifting through the criticism that is looking at that criticism and go, is there something to this criticism? And I think that it becomes very easy to be defensive. I think it becomes very easy to be someone that becomes like, well, this person said this, but they don't really know me. But if you look at human nature, you can look and go, well, I can see that, so you don't build up this like bitterness or this anger towards people, even if they're like, they don't like you, because it's like, well, they have a preconceived notion of who I am because of this event or this thing I did. And it's like, okay, well, if you don't like that, then fix what your issue is, change who you are as a person, and then take responsibility. And there's nowhere for anyone to go, because it's kind of like, well, did they say that they were sorry? Did they seem like they really felt bad for it? And it's like, yeah. Or are they doing the same thing? No. It's like, well, there is nowhere else to go, so but like I said, there has to be movement before people will really start to be able to see that you have actually started to change. And it's an incredible thing, because once you do, it's amazing how many people will support you. Like, once they see that you're like, wow, this person is really trying. Like, trying is such an empowering thing, because like my sister was saying, it's like, we all fail. We learn more from failing than we do from succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
Really. And I think you even hear that, we're talking about finances and jobs and careers and companies and stuff like that. It's like, it doesn't matter who you're talking to. It's like, no, I learned a lot. Most of what I've learned was from my failing, not from my success, and the people that are innovative, today are people that have failed completely, gotten down to barely nothing, and then raise themselves up because they have the belief in themselves and the belief in whether it's their product or their passion or whatever, So I think the biggest part of it is that if you can change your life, and then people realize, like, wow, I made like a really big mistake, it's not going to encompass your whole life, but I feel and can see it in people's life where that does happen. They make a mistake, they're like, this is who I identify as, and they give up, and that hurts everybody, because realistically, if people are doing what they love to do, if people are doing what makes them happy, if people are doing things that energize them, they're just better people to be around. They're happier, they're calmer, it's like, and when you look at somebody from a small portion of who they are, it dehumanizes the person, so once you get to humanize someone, you get to kind of see more of the core of who they are, and you get to kind of know them. It's like, wow, like, this is somebody that is really a special, person. And I think that elevates you to the point of, even if they make mistakes, understanding, like, what, we all have a bad day. I don't know, I could meet you tomorrow, never met you before, and I'm like, wow, she doesn't seem like a very nice lady.
Right.
I don't know. Your dog of 15 years could have passed away that morning. I don't know what's going on in your life, but generally speaking, if somebody has an attitude or an issue or whatever, they're going through stuff, and we've all been there. So I think kind of having that empathy for people in their lives helps a lot.
Okay, and Shane, do you have a family now? And what are you doing? Do you have a career as well, or a job?
Yeah, I don't have a family. I decided probably about 10 years ago that I didn't want to have children. It sounds like a weird, but I looked at it from a ROI perspective. So I was like, wow.
It's the right move.
I agree completely. Actually, I have no children and decided like 30 years ago, like that was not a part of my life because, yeah, why would I?
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's funny to people because they ask me, like, I have a vasectomy and, stuff like that. And they're like, oh, like, why did you, decide? It's a very big, surprisingly, when I got the vasectomy, the amount of questions and input that I got from people was way bigger than I thought it would be. How could you do that? Why would you do that? Or what about, passing on your name or whatever? And I think as I was growing up, I was afraid that I would be a bad parent. So I did not want to, even if I was better than my father, even if I was twice as good, I would still be a horrible father. So as I learned and as I grew and as I started kind of understanding my issues and my problems and started really the healing process, I also was looking at, well, what kind of life do I want to live? What kind of person do I want to be, but what kind of ultimately life, do I want to live? And like I said, people have these opinions, and I understand. I don't have the context of like my child, so if I had a daughter, and I was like, oh, well, I can't imagine my life without her. I don't have that context because I don't have any children.
Right.
So to me, I looked at it and said, what kind of life do I want to? And I think it's one thing that I really respect about my sister, Maile, is that we approached parenting. I approached it as I don't want to have children. She has a daughter, but we understood that you are completely 100% responsible for this human being. Their outcome a lot of times has to do with you. The way that they're raised has to do with you. How they feel about themselves has to do with you. It's a humongous responsibility. And now you no longer are your number one priority. If you're a parent, you're your number one priority, then you probably are going to have parenting issues, realistically. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I like to, I understood the realities. I think people think of having children and they're like, oh, I get to dress them and, they do some cute stuff and it's pretty culturally across the board. Everybody's going to like get married, have kids, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot different now. I think, I looked at it and was like, you know what, like, I don't want to like carry a bunch of stuff to the car. And then, I don't want to go to dinner and like, I'm not the kind of person that has like a screaming kid and sits there torturing everybody else in the restaurant. Like I would get up and leave. And I was like, I really don't want to get up and leave. I have a girlfriend and she doesn't want to have children. So it works out really well as far as that goes. And it gives me, and I'm not trying to like promote not having children, but it gives me so much more time. It gives me so much more money and flexibility that it's easier for me to parlay into things that I really want to do. So I'm currently a district property manager in Southern California. So I manage multiple rental properties from, houses to condos, apartment buildings and stuff like that. It's not something that I'm passionate about. It does afford me the money to live. I make a decent, income.
Right.
I have been working on and am shifting into having a consulting business that's more of like a life and wellness, more of like a life coaching business from the things that I've learned and went through. And I'm not coming up with any unique mindsets. I'm looking at successful people, like we talked about pattern recognition. So I'm looking at people that are successful, financially, mentally, spiritually, and looking at those people and go, oh, like, what are those people doing to be successful? Even though they all come from different backgrounds, they come from different countries, they come from their different ages and all this stuff. There is a cord that goes through a lot of things. So I look at that cord, and I think that I can help, a lot of people. And I hope that I can help encourage. I have a heart for, in particular, men that are in their like mid 40s to, mid 50, 55, 60. I think that the hopelessness that they get into, it's clear if you look at the suicide rate of men in that category. So I believe it's like, look, if you want to change something in your life, there are ways to do it. And you should try to be the best you can be, even if that takes small increments of time. Even if you improve yourself 1% every single day, that's 365% improvement throughout a year, and that's been kind of my thought and philosophy on it. So I'm not doing what I love to do. It allows me the money and the time to do things that I love to do, which is a great place to be, because it's basically, if you can do what you love to do and you can get paid to do it, that's the ultimate. If you can do something that you're good to do, that gives you the time and money to do what you like to do or you're passionate about, that's about the second. The third thing goes, you're doing something you don't really like to do, but it pays your bills. That's where most of everybody's landing, or you're working, you do something you hate doing, and it doesn't even give you enough money to pay your bills. So people are on those last two tracks generally. So my goal was for myself to get to the first or second. And so now I'm transferring from the second as far as doing something that makes good money and putting it into an effort that will be something that I enjoy, that's fulfilling, that I can help other people, but still make a good living at.
How long, as we wrap up, sorry, after you got out of prison, how long did it take you to get back on your feet financially?
25 years. No, it really, it wasn't. I think what it was that I have a good work ethic, and I recognize that I knew that there was something that I needed to do and wanted to do, but I didn't know exactly. I wasn't able to identify that. So I would say in the last, I'm 51 now. I just turned 51 about a week and a half ago. And I think it took realistically up until now, where I am, I combine the combination of being, I'm kind of a minimalist. And so my money that I make does not go into, it's like, for example, it's like I have like a Toyota truck. The thing will run for 300,000 miles. It's completely paid off. My girlfriend's car is like a small Kia, gets good gas mileage. It's paid off. I have no credit card debt. So I keep my living expenses, and my job pays for my apartment. So I keep my living expenses really low. That way I don't have that huge, every single month bill that has to come through, where it's like I'm living over. Realistically, I'm not. There's a lot of people that are making really good money that are working, and they spend every part of their money. And it's like, for me to do something else, I have to make, $18,000 a month. I put myself in a position where I didn't have to do that financially. So it gave me the freedom to do my own business, to train, to enjoy things that I want to do. So I lowered my costs in life, kept it very simple, because nobody really cares what kind of car you drive or whatever. You're not going to impress anybody for the most. you should be driving a really expensive car if it's not expensive to you. You know? So
Right.
I changed that part of my life, which helped me be more financially successful because, you know, I look and it's like, if I buy something that's on the higher end, it's usually something that has to do with growth. So it's something that helps me sleep better. You know, it's something that helps me be physically, emotionally, and mentally better as a person, you know. So I put those things, you know, into effect, and now I position myself where I'm good enough at my job where my boss is like, you can do what I can do whatever I want during the day. I can do whatever I want. I know what's required for me to do a good job, and I get it done. Once you get to that position, then it's like I can work on my own business. You know, I'm getting ready to do jujitsu competitions, you know, so I can train in the middle of the afternoon, you know. So I've established a point where I have enough freedom to really like grow in the areas that I want to grow. And I think that that financial freedom and not being stressed out about if the car breaks down, or I don't have to think about, you know, grocery shopping or anything like that. And that has given me, I think that's the best place to be, especially if you're going to transition into something different.
Okay. And Justin, with your movie making, I mean, how are you doing financially? I mean, how much did you have to put up for this documentary?
Well, yeah, you want specifics since it's a financial movie?
Sure.
Yeah, it's self-funded, labor of love. So myself and another producer funded it, and I think our total budget was around, at the end of the day, about $55,000. And yeah, I would love to keep doing what I love. So, you know, if people download it and stream it, and if you love it, tell your friends. That would definitely help me be able to continue making things that I'm passionate about.
So you were saying that this will be available on Amazon Prime.
Yes.
Do you get a cut for every time somebody downloads that?
We do, yeah.
Did you get money up front as well, and then a piece of, or is it only like you'll get money if people download it?
So we have a distribution deal, and it's a small advance of $5,000, which hasn't been paid out yet. But after that, yes, it's per stream, and I think they have to actually stream like more than 20 minutes or something of it to even get a few pennies. So
wow,
we just need a few million people to stream it. It would be great.
Okay. Is the movie at any festivals?
We premiered at the Hawaii International Film Festival a couple years ago. It's just a process as an independent filmmaker. It takes a long time to get things out, as I'm finding out. This is my first film, but you know, the film festival thing is a great way to get exposure. But at that point, you don't really have to have your footage cleared. You can use temp music, and so the premiere was great. And to be able to see it, you know, in a theater with an actual audience and seeing what, you know, connected with people was fantastic, and really surprising in some ways. But yeah, so now we're finally a couple years later getting it out.
Well, that sounds great. Maile, anything to add for you, your life going forward? Where do you see yourself in a couple of years?
Well, I tried to see a psychic to tell me that, because I've said to many people I'm done making big decisions, but no, I just want to continue to raise my daughter mindfully, and she's, as hard as it is, and you know, these two will attest that I have definitely supported their decision in not having children, because this is the hardest thing I have ever done. And yes, it is the most fulfilling and the most rewarding thing. And I'm so proud, and I can truly say I'm a great mom. But yeah, I just want to continue to see my daughter just thrive and become who she's meant to become, and be there to nurture and support all of her sparkles that she's brought to this world.
All right. Well, thank you so much to my guests. We have filmmaker Justin Young. He is the producer of My Hero, the Hitman, Maile Stant and Shane Stant, and they are the subjects of the documentary My Hero, the Hitman, which can be seen pretty much anywhere you or I don't know, anywhere you download, but definitely on Amazon Prime and other streaming services as well. So hopefully people will check that out. And I did learn a lot from the documentary, especially about redemption, especially in the eyes of your loved ones. I think that for Shane is probably more important to you than anybody else. It's having that sense of redemption in your sister's eyes. Not that, I don't know if you ever lost it, Maile, or not, but I'm sure it was a shock to her to learn about the attack on Nancy Kerrigan.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just excited for the world to meet my brother. Like, this is my brother, and I'm excited for the world to, you can see how smart he is. I mean, geez.
I know, that would have been probably nice to use more of the brain back in 1994.
Well, there's I will use the excuse of being young and dumb. So that does, and it's funny because when I see and I meet and I talk to I meet a lot of people throughout, training, and just, I'm always open to talking to a lot of young people, and it's like you look at them and they make comments and they're talking about stuff, and they're 20, 21 years old, and you just think, wow, it's such a different mindset in just getting experience in life. And they're going to make, mistakes, as we all do. It's kind of, there's different, variations and intensities of making those mistakes. And I think the one thing that is kind of rings in my head is you can make decisions that are life changing. What you do with that life changing decision has a lot to do with your mindset, but definitely our decisions can course you and put you on a different path. And then you have to maneuver around and through that path the best way that you can. And I think that my hope is that people will look at my story, and people will look at my business and what I do and say, hey, you know what, like, I still have an opportunity to make the best out of something that was negative. And this is not going to, encompass who I am as a person. Because I think the worst thing is to feel hopeless, to feel like you just have no hope for the future. And that's just a horrible place for any person to be in. I think a lot of people are in that place. So hopefully this documentary will let people know that regardless of how big your mistake was, on a world scale, huge stage, that, there is redemption and that there is hope. And I'm extremely happy with my life. And I'm excited every single day for it. And I'm growing every single day. And, I hope that other people can get to that point.
Maile says in the film about, learning about Shane's past, and hopefully this is a takeaway for everyone. It's not about looking back and, shaming him about who he was, but it's really about celebrating how far he's come from that. And so hopefully we can all do that for ourselves and each other.
I love that. That is a great way to finish the conversation. So thank you so much to my guests, and please look up the movie, the documentary, My Hero, the Hitman.
Great. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks for listening. You can email me with any questions or topics you want to hear about at hkelly@ksl.com. That's HKELLY@ksl.com. And because this is Money Making Sense, you can subscribe for free on Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, and you'll never miss another episode.
Thanks for being a Money Making Sense listener. Follow your common sense on the social media. Money Making Sense on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.